Hare Krishna. So thank you all very much for joining today's session. We will do the second chapter only, but I'll do a very brief recap of what we have seen the first chapter. Namam Vishnu Padaya Krishna Preshtaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Vedanta Swaminiti Namine Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Paschatya Deshadarine Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shadvata Gadadhara Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta Vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare 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 Krishna. So as we saw last time, the first canto ended with Parikshit Maharaj's question to Shukadev Goswami. So Shukadev Goswami arrives. Parikshit Maharaj very humbly puts forward this question as to what is the best thing for all people at all times, especially for a person at the time of death. So in response to this, and then he asks what should be done, what should not be done, what should be heard, what should not be heard, what should be chanted, what should not be chanted, and so on. And in response to this, first, Shukadev Goswami appreciated this question of Parikshit Maharaj. And then he mentions that how for people who are not interested in self-realization, there are so many useless subject matters to discuss about. But for those who wish to make perfection of their life, they have to hear, chant, and remember Krishna's name, form, glories, pastimes, etc. And he says that it does not matter whether one has already been practicing Karma Yoga, Jnana Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, as long as they understand the ultimate goal of life, which is to go back home, back to Godhead, and establish a relationship with Krishna. As soon as they understand that ultimate goal of life, there is only one path, that is bhakti. And he says that, and he mentions that actually this is accepted universally, and there are many people who have been practicing all these other paths that they eventually gave up the practice of the other practices and took up to bhakti. And Shukadev Goswami gives his own example of how he gave up he was very much absorbed in the path of Brahman realization, and he gave it up and he took up to the path of bhakti, like that. And then he says that I learned this Bhagavatam from my father. Now I am going to teach that very same Bhagavatam to you. Then he concludes by telling that therefore Shravanam, Kirtanam, Smaranam, these essential limbs of bhakti are the best ways of attaining the ultimate goal. But even amongst them, Harinam Sankirtan is the topmost. He mentioned that way. And then he mentions by giving the example of Katvanga Maharaj, that how, Katvanga Maharaj, he understood that the essence of all conclusions is to practice bhakti and establish a relationship with Krishna. So therefore, when he came to know that he had only one muhurta to live, he immediately absorbed himself in practice of bhakti and he perfected his life. He gives this example. And then later he starts describing about, even though he has mentioned what is, in his opinion, what is the ultimate goal of life and how one can attain the ultimate goal of life. But there are many other popular opinions amongst people who accept the Vedic gamut. Some people say that the ultimate goal is liberation through the process of yoga. That is one of the most popular opinions. So he describes the path of yoga, how this yoga, Ashtanga Yoga, has 8 limbs. Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi. And he starts describing this Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, and then Pratyahara, how by the controlled mind you pull the senses off. But after Pratyahara, then there is Dharana, which is a generic meditation on the form, and form which manifests within the heart. And then there is Dhyana, which is a more specific limb by limb meditation on the form of the Lord. And then there is Samadhi, where there is such a focused meditation on the form of the Lord that there is no distraction at all. Like that, he describes this 8 limbs. But then he also says that, but this is not very easy, because generally for a conditioned soul, his heart is filled with many um, uh, rajoguni and tamoguni impressions, which will create lot of distraction and bewilderment. So if so, then one has to have a very clear dharana. And in this context, we were discussing last time that that actually, uh, there are two kinds of yogis, you know, uh, those who aspire for, and both these kinds of yogis, they aspire for liberation only. Okay, so uh, liberation means Sahyajya Mukti. Okay, so they perform yama, niyama, asana, pranayama, and pratyahara. And after practicing pranayama and pratyahara, so one category of yogis, they have some secondary desires. Even though their primary desire is liberation, they have secondary desires to enjoy certain other facilities on their way to liberation. Okay, so these are called as secondary abhilashas. So they want to reach that stage of liberation after fulfilling their curiosity to enjoy the smaller pleasures which are available in the planetary systems. So such people, they are not qualified to meditate on the Paramatma form of the Lord. They have to meditate uh, on the Virat Roop. Okay. So, and this Virat Roop meditation is called as gradual liberation. So, liberation, we have to understand what is liberation. Okay. So, liberation means giving up of subtle body. That is liberation. Death means giving up of gross body. Dehinosmin yata dehe kaumaram yavvanam jara tata dehantara prapti dhirastatra namuyati. So when the soul carries the subtle body from one gross body to another gross body, that is death. But liberation means giving up of the subtle body also. So because a Paramatma meditating yogi, he has a fairly clean heart without any material desires. So he directly meditates on Paramatma. And when he meditates on Paramatma, Dharana, Dhyana, and Samadhi, he reaches the stage of Brahman realization, which is called as Labdopashanti. And then he practices what is called as Shat Chakra Yoga to at once give up his gross body and subtle body at one shot, and then he leaves he leaves this gross body and subtle body and goes and merges in the Brahma Jyoti. So this is called as Sadhyo Mukti or instant liberation. Okay, at once he gives up the subtle body. Whereas this attached yogi, he meditates not on the Paramatma but on the Virat form of the Lord. So when he meditates on the Virat form of the Lord, the purpose is to weaken his material desires. So when he meditates on the on the Virat form of the Lord, where he sees whatever he wants to enjoy belongs to this Virat Purusha, then it may weaken his desire to enjoy it. And then if he gives up all those secondary desires, then he becomes qualified to meditate on the Paramatma. And when he meditates on the Paramatma, Dharana, Dhyana, Samadhi, then he attains Brahman realization. Then he performs Shat Chakra Yoga to pierce the soul from the Brahmarandra and enter into the Brahma Jyoti and attain liberation. But sometimes their material desires may be very stubborn, and they may say, look, I want liberation, but definitely I want to attain that liberation after uh, uh, after actually checking out these various other pleasures that are available. Not that I want to settle down for those pleasures, but I don't wish to attain liberation without completely convinced, without enjoying at least for some time all these things. So he undergoes what is called as gradual liberation. So gradual liberation means what? Gradual, step by step destruction of subtle body. This is called as krama mukti. Krama mukti. So in this krama mukti path, as soon as the yogi meditates on the Virat Purusha, when he gives up his body, he gives up only his gross body. He does not immediately attain liberation. Okay. So what happens is, and he is also not a person who is controlled by karma. So now he has fixed his mind on liberation, but through a long. So what happens is he goes through 13 destinations, of which not all destinations are given in either Bhagavatam or Bhagavad Gita. So this Krama Mukti is described in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita also. Agnir Jyotir Ahashukla Shanmasa Uttarayanam Yogi Prayata Gachanti Brahma Brahma Vidojana. Like that, in the 8th chapter of Bhagavad Gita also, this Krama Mukti path is described. We will describe this little bit more in detail in the 2nd chapter. So then he goes through all these various lokas, Vaishwanar Loka, Shishumar Loka, Mahar Loka, Brahma Loka, and so on. These are the places in which there is, starting with gross opportunity to fulfill gross material desires, subtler desires. So what happens is that when he comes to the first, then he gets an appropriate body through which he can fulfill a particular level of desire. Then once he is satisfied, then he gives up that body, gives up that part of subtle bodies, that part of desire, and then goes to the next planet where he gets a subtler body to fulfill a subtler desire. Once he is satisfied, he gives up this body and comes to the next planet where so like that, the subtle body is getting step by step destroyed. And by the time he goes through the last layer of the earth, the 8 layers also he covers. When he pierces the stage of Pradhan, he has a very, very, very subtle body. He gives that up also, and then eventually merges in the Brahmajyoti. So this is called as Krama Mukti, or uh, uh, gradual liberation. And this path is called as Archiradi Marga, which is very popular terminology which is mentioned in the Shastras. So, and this Archiradi Marga is not just for attaining Brahma Jyoti. In the other sampradayas like Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, this Archiradi Marga is suggested, this mixed devotional path of gradual ascent to Vaikunta is also suggested in the Sri Vaishnava Sampradaya, where there is a facility for mixed devotees to gradually elevate themselves to Vaikunta, like that. So this is a very brief thing that we are going to discuss. So essentially, in the first chapter that we discussed and the second chapter, we have to discuss, Srila Shukadeva Goswami will be discussing 2 things. So there is the attached yogi, okay, and the detached yogi. Okay. So for the attached yogi, he has to describe the Dharanashraya. Dharanashraya means the object of meditation, which is the Virat Roop. Okay. And then you have to discuss the Dharanashraya for the detached yogi also, which is the super soul, Paramatma. Okay. And then you have to discuss path of liberation. And the same path of liberation, how the detached yogi attains liberation. So this will be the path of Krama Mukti, and this will be the path of Sadhyo Mukti, instantaneous liberation. Okay. So till now, what we have discussed in this first chapter is Dharanashraya, the description of the Dharanashraya of the attached yogi. Okay, the attached yogi, he meditates on the Virat form, and towards the second half of the chapter, we discuss a description of the Virat Purusha. So throughout second canto, we will three descriptions of Virat Purusha. The first description will be in the first chapter. The second description will be fifth chapter, and sixth chapter will be the second description. The third description of Virat Purusha will be in the 10th chapter of second canto. And then there will be two more descriptions of Virat Purusha in the initial part of the third canto also. Okay. So these, what is the purpose of these descriptions? The purpose is actually in the, even though there are three descriptions and they look very similar also, but a closer look at these descriptions will tell that the purpose of the description of the three descriptions of Virat Purusha is different actually. The first description of Virat Purusha, which comes in the first chapter, is to describe the Dharana Shreya, the object of meditation for a attached yogi. Then in the fifth chapter and the sixth chapter, the description of the Virat Purusha, where it comes in the where also the Virat Purusha is described. The purpose of that description is to describe how actually the Supreme Lord is the material cause and the effective cause of this material world. So material cause means, like, you can take the example of making a pot. So to make a pot, clay pot, clay is the material cause, the potter is the effective cause. So the material cause is called as Upadana Karana, and the effective cause is called the Nimitta Karana. So in describing the universal form in the fifth and sixth chapter of second canto, even though the universal form is described, but then the purpose of description is to show how the Supreme Lord is both the material cause, like the clay is for the pot, and he is also the effective cause, like the potter is for the pot. He is the cause of both. So that is described in the fifth and sixth chapter. And in the 10th chapter, again, when the universal form is described, the purpose of the description is to show that how when it's a little bit of allegory involved here, not exactly allegory, but something like that, that how in this material world, for every living entity, the cause of his gross body and the subtle body is the desires, is his own desires. The living entity's desires shape his gross body and subtle body. Okay, that is a subtle message of the third description of Virat Rup, which comes in the 10th chapter of Bhagavad Gita. Anyways, these are some details. Then we discussed this description of the universal form, how various parts of the body are occupied by these various planetary systems and so on. So and then we saw okay. So now let us move on to the second chapter of this. Was a brief prelude that I wanted to give. Let's move on to the second chapter of the second canto. So in the second chapter, Srila Gurudev Goswami starts by describing by giving an example of someone because Parikshit Maharaj may ask, what is this Virat Rupa? So this Virat Rupa is an imaginary form. There is no real Virat Rupa as such. Okay, I will just touch upon this point because this is very critical. So now, is Virat Rupa real? Well, we have to understand here what is real, what is. So Virat Rupa is what the constituents of Virat Rupa, which is whatever you see in this universe. Atala, Vitala, Sutala, the Patala Lokas, or the Satya Loka, the Bhuloka, all these things are real. So the constituents of the Virat form are real. But what is imagination is to think that all these various planetary systems, actually they form the part of the Supreme Lord's body. That is an imagination. Because the Supreme Lord's body is not made of Bahiranga Shakti or material energy. The Supreme Lord's body is made of Antaranga Shakti. But this kind of an imagination is favorable for an attached yogi who is interested in enjoying this material world. So it is an imagination for sure, but it is an imagination that has some utility. Like say, for example, if you see maps, you see the map of the United States of America. Okay, you say here is New York, here is New Jersey, here is Chicago, whatever. So you show it on a map. I mean, it does not literally. The Chicago is not there on that piece of paper. New York is not there on that piece of paper. So it is you are expected to imagine in order to give a topographical idea of where the different states and cities in the United States are. So even though it is an imagination, a map is an imagination, but that imagination has some utility, right? So it gives you a fair topographical idea of how the various states are situated in the United States of America, right? So just because something is an imagination does not mean that it has no utility. So similarly, this Virat Purusha is an imagination, but it has some utility for particular personalities like the yogis. These attached yogis, they do have a utility in meditating on this form of Virat Purusha. Okay, so now Parikshit Maharaj may ask, so this is the way in which we have to understand how the Virat Rupa is an imagination. So the constituents of the Virat Purusha, they are not imagination. Like if you form, say for example, if someone is very artistically gifted, so they may take some carrots, some cabbage, some green peas, and many colorful vegetables, and put them together to make a form of Krishna. So they may say that here is Krishna. So in one sense, it is not exactly Krishna, but definitely it gives an idea of how the absolute truth looks like. He has a flute in hand, he has a peacock feather, he has a darkish complexion and things like that. So this is an imagination in one sense. Of course, for a devotee, it is not an imagination. The photograph or the deity is not an imagination. Please don't take it in that sense. But nevertheless, it's an imagination because the Lord's body is not made of carrots and cabbage and peas and things like that, right? So, but that does not mean, just because it's an imagination, does not mean carrot is an imagination, green peas is an imagination, cabbage is an imagination. They are all real. So the constituents of that Krishna, that imagined Krishna is real, but to think that Krishna is made of carrots and cabbage is an imagination. So similarly, The universal form, the constituents of the universal form, the 14 planetary systems and whatever is there within the 14 planetary systems, that is real. But to think that there is a personality who exists with the Patala Loka as his feet, the Satya Loka as his head and crown and things like that, that is an imagination. But that imagination has a utility for some class of people who have a particular qualification or adhikar. That is the sense in which the universal form is an imagination. Anyways, enough of a prelude. I have consumed more than half of my time in just presenting this prelude, but I think this is a critical prelude in order to understand the subject matter further, because the second canto is very technical canto. So unless you clarify by just rushing, lot of these concepts will not become clear at all. So, so therefore, I'm taking this liberty, and but at the cost of maybe, I may not be able to fully complete the second chapter. So I will apologize for that beforehand. So, anyways, so Shukadeva Goswami starts this chapter by giving an example of Brahma. How even though this universal form is an imagination, but this has some utility. But of course, the yogis meditate on the universal form for achieving liberation. But Brahmaji is a very popular personality. Everyone knows Brahmaji. So Shukadeva Goswami is giving the example of Brahma, where once when Brahma forgot how to create this universe, it's not that every day when Brahmaji gets up, he forgets how to create. Some of the days he forgets how to create, and it's not that every day, every time he forgets how to create, he goes up and down the lotus flower, and then he hears tapa tapa and he performs tapasya like that. No, there are multiple times. Sometimes he gets an inspiration, inner spurti or inner inspiration to meditate on the universal form. So on this particular day, when Brahmaji got up and he forgot how to create, he gets this spurti or this inspiration to meditate on the universal form. And after he meditates on the universal form, he gets the memory about how to create. So therefore, here Shukadeva Goswami is giving an example of a personality who actually meditated on the universal form and he got a benefit. So therefore, this is just to give faith that this meditation on the universal form is actually a bona fide form of meditation, like that. Then okay. Then he says, Shabdasya hi brahmana esha panta yan namabir dhyayati dir apartaihi paribramam statra na vindate arthan maya maye vasanaya shayanaha. Then the question arises that what about you're talking about the path of yoga to attain liberation, but the Vedas also speak about Swarga as a very glorified goal. The path of karma to attain Swarga is also glorified in the Vedas. What about that? So he says, Shabdasya hi Brahmana Esha Panta. So this path of the Vedas, which talks about karma, okay, Yad Namabir Dhyayati Dihi, in which the intelligence concentrates on various names: Swarga, the Nandan Kanan gardens, the Apsaras, the enjoyment, the Somaras, and all these things. But Apa Artaihi, these are useless because they are all temporary. So this is just like Shayanaha, a person who is sleeping, Mayamaye Vasanaya, who is desiring illusory happiness, Na Vindate Arthan Paribramam Statra. So a person who is, so this material enjoyment in this material world, which is propagated by this path of karma, is like a person who is sleeping. In his dream, he he enjoys various things, and as soon as he wakes up from his dream, he is disappointed, realizing, oh, it was just a dream, like that. So in one sense, this Abrahma Bhavana Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. So this uh, journey of the living entity from from the Patal Loka to Brahma Loka again and again, roaming in this samsara chakra, punarapi jananam, punarapi maranam, punarapi janani jatare shayanam. Iha samsare bahudustare, kripaya pare pahi murare, as Srila Shankaracharya says. So this is actually like a dream. So when the living entity during liberation, when he wakes up from his dream, he will just sort of laugh it off, you know. So this is just like a dream, Srila Shukadeva Goswami says. Atapir namasu yavadartaha syada pramatto vyavasaya buddhihi siddhe anyatartena yateta tatra parishramam tatra samikshamanaha. Therefore, an intelligent person who is very clearly attentive to his goal of to a transcendental goal, he will not get absorbed in this world of names. Okay, and such a person will not attempt to support himself by any other means of this karma. He will not accept this path of karma because understanding that it is just a waste of time. It is just a waste of time. It is just like a dream. So rather he would endeavor just to keep his body and soul together so that he can focus all his time on his practice of attaining a transcendental destination, which is in this case, which here he is talking about the path of yoga. Okay, so what does it mean to endeavor only to keep the body and soul together? So Srila Shukadeva Goswami says, Satyam shitau kim kashipo prayaser baho swasiddhehi upabarhanai kim satyanjalau kim purda annapatrya digvalkaladau satikim dukulaihi. He says that what does it mean? It means to live a life of simplicity, you know, where to avoid prayas. He says that when earth is available, what is the need for a bed? When your arms are there, what is the need for a pillow? Your palms are there. Satyanjalau kim purda annapatrya. Your two hands are there. If you feel hungry, go pluck a fruit and eat. If you feel thirsty, cup some water from the river and drink. Why do you need vessels to cook food? And then he says, Digvalkaladau satikim dukulaihi. So when the four directions are there, why do you need dress to wear? Someone may say, well, come on, I am a human being. I have a sense of, decency. I don't want to feel embarrassed. I cannot wear the four directions. I need some dress. He says, okay, tree bark is there. Wear the tree bark. Someone may say, oh, tree barks, okay, but during winters it will be very cold. Tree bark will not protect me from cold. Shukadeva Goswami says, Chiranikim patina santi. Are they not torn, disposed clothes that people throw away? You can pick up that cloth and wear. Then he says, oh, what will I do to fill my stomach? So he says, Naivangripa dishanti bhiksham. Have the trees stopped giving charity of fruits and vegetables? And what will I do for drinking? Saritopya susyan. Have all the rivers gone dry? Take some water and drink. He says, where will I stay? Ruddagu hakim. Have all the caves all closed? Is there, no vacancy board in all the caves? Go find a cave for yourself. Stay there. He says, okay, I can stay in a cave, but what if a cobra or a tiger also, is wishing to share that cave with me? What will guarantee my protection? He says, Kim ajitova ati na upashannan. So he says, has Krishna given upon his promise that Kaunteya pratijani hi name bhakta pranashyati? Krishna has guaranteed protection. Has Krishna given upon those promise, or has Krishna forgotten that promise? Kasmat bhajanti kavayo dana durmadandan. So why should the wise people worship these people who are infatuated with money? So, so if you go and depend on these people in this way, one cannot, if one becomes dependent on the wealth of other people, they cannot practice any spiritual path, because they will become, instead of becoming dependent on Krishna, they will become dependent on other people and money. So, so therefore he says this is the path of a yogi. So if someone has to meditate on the Paramatma, he should have this kind of detachment. Evam swachitte swata eva siddha atma priyo artho bhagavan anantah tam nirvrito niyatartho bhajeta samsara hetu uparamascha yatra. He says that in this way, if one's heart is clean with absolutely no material desires, completely detached, in such a person's heart, the Paramatma manifests after the stage of uh, Yama, Niyama, Asana, Pranayama, Pratyahara. At the stage of Dharana, the Supreme Lord manifests within the heart as Paramatma. Tam nirvrito niyatartho bhajeta. And one who meditates on this form and worships this form within the heart, samsara hetu uparamascha yatra. He can very easily escape this material world and attain liberation. Kastam tvanadritya paranuchintam rite pashun asatim nama kuryat. Pashyanjanam patitam vaitaranyam swakarmajan paritapan tushanam. So who is that intelligent person who day in and day out sees people with material desires dying and going to Yamaloka and suffering there? Who is that person who will also, after seeing all this, will not learn his lesson and continue to meditate, continue to perform this karma kanda to suffer in this material world? So that person will give up all these things, accept the path of yoga, perfect the path of yoga, and aim for liberation. So who is that personality who manifests within the heart of the yogi, on whom he is supposed to meditate upon? Kechit swadehantar hridayavakashe pradeshamatram purusham vasantam chaturbhujam kanja ratanga shanka gadadaram dharanaya smaranti. That is mentioned that the yogis meditate on the Paramatma who measures one pradesha. One pradesha means, I think, some 6 or 7 inches. That is the size of Paramatma. But someone, many times devotees say, oh, that is the size of Paramatma within a human body. In a mosquito's body, the Paramatma is smaller according to the size of the mosquito. This is not true. The size of Paramatma is same in any living entity's heart. Andantarastam paramanu chayantarastam. The size of Paramatma between two atoms is also pradesha matram. So that is the that is possible for Paramatma. He can measure one pradesha but still occupy the space between two atoms. So that is the Achintya Shakti of the Supreme Lord. So Kechit Swadehantar Hridayavakashe Pradesha Matram Purusham Vasantam. So the form of the the Paramatma who manifests within the yogi's heart is described. Chaturbhujam Kanjaratanga Shanka Gadadaram Gadharanaya Smaranti. So during the Dharana process, he meditates on the Paramatma with 4 hands holding Shanka Chakra Gada Padma within the heart. Prasanna Vaktram Nalinayate Kshanam Kadamba Kinjal Kapishangavasasam Lasan Maharatna Hiranmayangadam Spuran Maharatna Kirita Kundalam. You know how the beautiful ornaments that are worn by the Paramatma form, his smiling face, his lotus petal like eyes, the yellow cloth that he wears, all of that is described. Unnidda Hrit Pankaja Karnikalaye Yogeshwarasta Pita Pada Pallavam Shri Lakshmanam Kaustubaratna Kandaram Amlana Lakshmya Vanamalayachitam. So further description of his form, where he manifests within the Unnidra Hrit Pankaja Karnikalaye, the heart of the yogi, which is compared to a lotus, which has fully blossomed due to the practice of the yoga process. In that heart, the Supreme Lord manifests, or he is seen. Of course, he is there in the heart of all the living entities, but he is clearly seen in the heart of that yogi with the Srivatsa mark, wearing the Kaustuba jewel, the Vanamala, and all that. Vibhushitam Mekalayanguliyakair Mahadaner Nupura Kankanadi Snigda Amala Akunchita Neela Kuntalair Virochamana Anana Hasapeshalam. Further beautiful description of the glossy black hair of the Paramatma, how he is decorated with various other ornaments is described. Adina Leela Hasite Kshanollasat Bhru Banga Samsuchita Buri Anugraham Ikshecha Tinta Mayamenam Ishwaram Yavan Mano Dharanaya Vatishtate. It is mentioned that the face of the Lord describes his bountiful mercy towards his worshippers. He wants to bestow all mercy upon them. His smiling glance, playful smiling glance, all indicates bountiful mercy. And Iksheta Chinta Mayamenam Ishwaram. So the yogi should meditate on this form of the Lord, dharana form, dharana, yavan maya dharanaya vatishtate. So he should not move on to meditation on the individual limbs of the Lord till the dharana is complete, till where the yogi accomplishes a fairly, you can say, steady meditation on the form of this Lord. Okay. Then एकैकशोङ्गानि धियानुभावयेत् पादादि यावद् हसितं गदावृतः जितं जितं स्थानम् अपोह्य धारयेत् परं परं शुद्ध्यति धीर्यता यथा. So when dharana is accomplished, then comes dhyana. Ekasho angani dhyanubhavayet, where the yogi starts meditating on the individual limbs of the Lord. Padadi yavad hasitam gadabhrata, starting from the feet till the lotus face of the Lord. Jitam jitam sthanam apohya dharayet param shuddhyati dhiryata yata. As and when he accomplishes meditation on one limb, starting from the lotus feet to the lotus feet, while he moves from one limb to the other limb, gradually there is purification of the heart. There is gradual purification of heart, more and more and more and more and more purification of the heart. So one may say, but you said that one is qualified to meditate on the Paramatma only when his heart is already purified. Now you are telling at the stage of dhyana, there is gradual purification of heart. So one may ask, is the Paramatma meditating yogi, is purification a prerequisite, or is purification a product of his dhyana? Because this seems little contradictory, one may say. So this is where we have to understand terminologies in the Shastras. In the Shastras, many times have a relative usage and an absolute usage. Many times when the Shastras speak about, they use some terminologies, many times they may have a relative usage. For example, the stage of Anartha Nivritti. Okay. And after which you reach the stage of Nishta. So when Anartha Nivritti is complete and you reach Nishta, does it mean at the stage of Nishta there are no anarthas? No. So here, completion of Anartha Nivritti means, it means Praiki Anartha Nivritti. Almost complete. It is not absolutely complete. So Praiki means almost. So almost means what? Good enough for aiding steady meditation, Nishta, steady practice of devotional service. Atyantiki Anartha Nivritti, absolutely complete Anartha Nivritti happens only at the stage of Prema. But even though before Nishta, that stage is called as Anartha Nivritti. So there Anartha Nivritti means almost complete destruction of the anarthas rather than absolutely complete destruction of anarthas. Similarly, when we say that the Paramatma meditative yogi's heart must be pure for him to qualify to meditate on the Paramatma, it means almost beyond a particular threshold where his meditation on the Paramatma form is not distracted by material desires. That is the meaning. Okay. So then, Yavanna Jayeta Paravaresmin Vishweshware Drashtari Bhakti Yoga Tavat Staviyah Purushasya Rupam Kriyavasane Prayata Smareta. So, but then he says, but as long as one is not fairly clean in his heart and has developed a devotional disposition towards the Paramatma, till that time he should not be meditating on the Paramatma form of the Lord. Tavat Staviyah Purushasya Rupam. He should meditate on the Taviyah Purusha, the Virat Purusha within the Virat Purusha. He should meditate on the imaginary form. Kriyavasane Prayatah Smareta. Kriyavasana means, so such a person should continue practicing his Nishkama Karma Yoga, and then he should meditate on the Virat form of the Lord within the heart. So, then he says that, so what is the, so now starting from the 15th verse onwards, just give me a second. Starting from the 15th verse onwards, 15 to 21 is going to describe the Sadhyo Mukti. Okay. So Sadhyo Mukti, where the detached yogi attains instant liberation. Okay. So he says, Stiram Sukam Asanam Astito Yatir Yada Jihasur Imamangalokam Kal Deshecha Manona Sajjayet Prana Niyachen Manasa Jitasuhu. So here he is talking about Stiram Sukam Cha Asanam Astito Yatir. He is talking about the asana. Okay. So such a yogi should sit in a place where it is a very firm asana, not like the chair that I am sitting, you see here. It keeps rocking back and forth. Even though I want to sit straight, my back is paining, but I'm not able to do it because it's like a rocking chair, right? Stiram sukam cha asanam astito yatir yada jihasur imamangalokam. If he wishes to instantaneously transcend this material universe and attain the Brahma Jyoti, he should find a good place. Kalecha deshecha manona sajjayet. He should not be attached to a particular time or place to give up his body, because that dependence on time is only for the attached yogi, not for the detached yogi. Prana niyachen jitasuhu. Now that he has accepted a firm asana, he should try to regulate his mind through the practice of pranayama. Manaswa buddhya amalaya niyamya kshetrajna etam ninayet tamatmani atmanam atman avarudya dhiro labdopashantir virameta krityat. So when he tries to, then when his mind has become steady, he can try to meditate on the Paramatma form of the Lord. So that Paramatma form of the Lord, if he finds some difficulty, he can make use of the additional help from the buddhi, also the intelligence, and try to fix his mind on the Paramatma. And then he practices through dharana, dhyana, and samadhi. When he reaches that stage of samadhi, that stage of samadhi is called as Labda Upashanti. Labdopashanti means Brahman realization. What the Bhagavad Gita calls as the Brahma Bhuta stage. Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kamshati. Tamas sarveshu bhuteshu madbhaktim labate param. So that stage is called as, that Brahma Bhuta stage is called as Labdopashanti here in Bhagavatam. Labda Upashanti. Nayatra kalo animisham paraprabhu kutonu deva jagatam ya ishire. Nayatra sattvam narajas tamascha navai vikaro namahan pradhanam. The stage of Brahman realization is described here. So a person, so Brahman realization means he has become a Jivan Mukta now. He has become a Jivan Mukta, a living liberated person. Okay. So Nayatra Kalo Animisham Paraprabhu Kutonu Deva Jagatamya Ishire. So such a person, time cannot have its influence on that person. It cannot create fear in that person because he is no longer attached to anything of this material world. What to speak of the demigods? The demigods have no influence on that person. Nayatra Sattvam Narajas Tamascha. So that person is no longer influenced by the material vasanas, Sattva Rajas Tamas. Navai Vikaro Namahan Pradhanam. Such a person is not influenced by the false ego and also the Mahat Tattva or Pradhan. Param Padam Vaishnavam Amananti Tad Yandineti Tyatad Utsisirkshava Visrijya Dauratmya Mananya Sauhrida Hridopa Guhyarha Padam Pade Pade. And that person, Atad Utsisirkshavaha. Atad, Tad means Brahman. Atad means anything that is not Brahman, things of this material world. Atad Utsisirkshavaha. So this yogi who is completely convinced of giving up everything of this material world, Tad Param Padam Vaishnavam Amananti. That Param Vaishnavam Padam Amananti. They Amananti means they thoroughly know this impersonal aspect of Vishnu. this Brahma Jyoti, Brahman. Tat Parampadam Vaishnava Mamananti. What is that Brahman aspect? Yad na iti iti. That which is described as neti, 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 not this, not this, not this, not this. That Brahman they have realized perfectly. Visrijya Dauratmyam. So in order to meditate, in order to realize the Brahman, they should not have any Dauratmya. Duratma means improper intelligence. Improper intelligence means intelligence Mayavad. Because through Mayavad understanding, you cannot attain Brahmajyoti. Mayavadis desire to attain Brahmajyoti, but they cannot attain Brahmajyoti because of their offensive nature. So Visrijya Dauratmyam means they do not have an intelligence which is offensive, which says that the absolute truth has no form, no legs, nothing at all. Because this, even though he is aspiring for Brahmajyoti, he is meditating on the Paramatma form, who has form, Chaturbhujam, Kanja, Ratanga, Shanka, Gadadaram, Dharanaya, Smaranti. And while meditating on this form within the heart, he does not think that this form is imaginary. He does not think that this form is material. He knows that this form is eternal, transcendental, and real. Okay. So Visrijya Dauratmyam Ananya Sauhrida. And Ananya Sauhrida means he rejects everything which is not connected to the Lord. Krida Upaguhya Parampadam Pade Pade. Krida Upaguhya Arhapadam Pade Pade. And within his heart, he very deeply embraces the lotus feet of the Lord. So which means this person does not give up the, even while achieving liberation, he may eventually give up the path of jnana and yoga, but he does not give up meditation on the form of the Lord, which is considered essentially to be a limb of bhakti. So that is what Bhagavad Gita also says, that Brahma Bhuta Prasannatma na shochati na kankshati samas sarveshu bhuteshu mad bhaktim labate param. So mad bhaktim labate param means this Ashtanga yogi or a Jnana yogi, even though they practice bhakti as a secondary limb, at the time of liberation when they become a Jivan Mukta, they give up the limbs of Jnana, Yoga, etc., but they don't give up the limb of bhakti. So that is the meaning of that. Hrudopa guhyarha padam pade pade. And then eventually, from 19 to 21, how he practices this Shat Chakra Yoga. I will just summarize this. So in the Shat Chakra Yoga, you know that there are 8 chakras. And the soul which is suspended in the prana is moved through the Mooladhara Chakra, which is the bottommost. As I mentioned, you have to close all the other holes because this body is a Navadvara Pure Dehi. This is a body of 9 holes, and the 10th hole is the Brahmarandra, which is not exactly open, but it has to be broken open, right? So the yogi who is sitting, when after he becomes a Jivan Mukta, when he reaches the stage of Labdhopa Shanti, he closes all these holes through the yogic process and forces the jiva who is suspended in the prana to move through the higher and higher and higher and higher chakras, and then eventually forces to escape through the Brahmarandra. So the Brahmarandra, explodes, or it breaks open, and then the soul leaves and then merges in the Brahmajyoti. So this is the this is the instantaneous liberation performed by a yogi who is fairly free of the material desires. But then there is this path of the attached yogi. Yadi prayasyan nripa parameshtyam vaihayasanam utayadviham ashtadipatyam gunasannivaye sahaiva gachen manasendriyaischa. Yadi prayasyan, but if the yogi who wants liberation also has this desire to enjoy the other subtler enjoyments which are available in this material universe before going there. Okay. So these are called as secondary abhilashas. Okay. Secondary abhilasha. Okay. So Nripa Parameshtyam, if he wants to enjoy in the Brahmaloka Vaihayasanam Utayad Viharam, or if he wants to enjoy in the Nandankanan gardens and other such things, briefly before achieving liberation. Ashtadipatyam, or if he wants to check out the Ashta Siddhis. So then Sahaiva Gachen Manasa Indriyaista. And such a person, when he gives up his body, unlike the Paramatma meditating yogi, when he gave up the gross body, he gave up the subtle body also, and the soul went and merged in the Brahmajyoti. But this person, when he gives up his gross body, only his gross body is given up, his subtle body is not given up. So he keeps transmigrating only. He is not yet ready for complete liberation. Okay. Yogeshwaranam gatirahuranta bahirlokya pavanantaratmanam na karmabhistam gatim apnuvanti vidya tapo yoga samadhi bhajam. So it is mentioned that this yogi has what is called as pavana antaratmanam. Pavana means air. Antaratma means subtle body. So pavanantaratmanam means just like the air can move anywhere. Antascharo vayu rivatma sakshi, like that when Vyasadev talks about Narada Muni. Just like the air, you can go anywhere. So similarly, air can go anywhere. This subtle body of this yogi can go to any planetary system within this material world that he wants to go to. Okay, that's why it is called as Pavana Antaratmanam. It is called a subtle body, which is like air, which can go anywhere. And when they are going to go to various planetary systems, which are like Swargik and then higher than Swarga also. Na karmabir tam gatim apnuvanti. They don't go to these places on the strength of their karma. The ordinary people who practice the path of karma, they develop pious karma, and by that pious karma, they go to the higher planets. But these yogis, they don't go there on the strength of their karma, because they are not karmis, they are actually yogis. Okay. Even though they may have some tinges of material desires, but their prime goal is liberation only. So then how do they go to these planetary systems? Vidya, Tapo, Yoga, Samadhi, Bhajam. Okay. Vidya, Tapo, Yoga, Samadhi, Bhajam means, Vidya means they worship the Lord within the heart. Tapo means they follow Dharma. Yoga means they follow the path of Ashtanga Yoga. And they also follow Samadhi, Bhajam means they also follow the path of Jnana also. Vidya, Tapo, Yoga, Samadhi, Bhajam. On the strength of their spiritual practice, they go to these planets. Otherwise, so these Swargic planetary systems, two categories of people go. One are those who go there on the strength of their piety. So the principle there is Shine Punya Martyalokam Vishanti. As soon as the Swarga pious credit is gone, you fall down back, okay, to the Bhuloka. Or Abrahma Bona Loka Punaravartino Arjuna. But in the case of these Krama Muktas who go to these places, na karmabhistam gatim apnuvanti. They do not achieve this place on the strength of their karma. So therefore, the principle of Shine Punya Martilokam Vishanti, that as soon as their karma is, pious credit is gone, they will fall back. This principle does not apply to them. They can stay there as long as they want. And once they are satisfied, they give up that gross body, then they give up a small part of that subtle body also, and then they move on to the next planet, like that. Vaishvanaram yati vihaya sagatah Shushumnaya Brahmapatena Shocisha Viduta Kalko at Harerudasta Prayati Chakram Nripashaishumaram. So here he goes through, there are 13 destinations before he reaches Brahmajyoti. All 13 are neither mentioned in Bhagavad Gita nor mentioned in Bhagavatam, but it is mentioned in the other Shastras. Okay. So I will not go into the details, which all stops he goes, but essentially he goes there, enjoys. So he goes to that planet. Okay. Then he enjoys. Then after, then he becomes satisfied. Okay. Then he gives up desire and part of the subtle body along with the gross body. Okay. And then he goes to next planet. Okay. So he comes to the Vaishwanara Loka, which is called the planet of Archi in the scriptures. I won't go into the details of what it is. He gets an appropriate gross body, which is perfectly suited to enjoy in that planet. He enjoys there. Once he is satisfied, he says, okay, fine. I'm ready to move on. So he becomes satisfied. So he gives up the desire to enjoy that level of happiness. Okay. And then when he gives up the gross body, along with that, he also gives up a part of subtle body in which desire to enjoy that kind of um, pleasures is given up. So he has become partly liberated. So let's say 10% of the subtle body is destroyed. So there is partial liberation. Then he moves to the next planet, same thing happens like that. Tadfanabhim tu ativatya vrushnor aniyasa virejana virajena atmanekah namaskritam brahma vidam upaiti kalpayusho yad vibudaramante. So in this way he crosses through Swarga, crosses through Maharloka, and when he reaches Maharloka, ato anantasya mukanalena dandahyamanam sa niriksha vishvam nirati siddheshwara yushtadishnyam yad dvaiparadhyam taduparameshtyam. When he reaches the Maharloka, which is just above Swarga, there he notices when he is enjoying in Maharloka a subtler kind of sense enjoyment. It is time for Brahmaji's night. And during Brahmaji's night, from Patala Loka to Swarga Loka, all the planets are destroyed. Sankarshana Anantasya Mukha Analen, by the fire which is emanating from the mouth of Anantasesh, till Swarga Loka gets destroyed. But that fire is so strong that fire is the heat of that fire is experienced in Maharloka also. So along with the Maharvasis, this Kramamukta also goes to the higher planet, which is Janaloka, till that the influence of the fire is lost. So then they come back to Maharloka like that. So he goes to Janaloka. Nayatra shoko najara na mrityur nartir na chodvega rite kutaschit yat chittato adaha kripaya nidam vidam duranta dukkha prabhavanu darshanat. So then in this way he goes to Janaloka, Tapaloka, and then eventually reaches Satyaloka. And the description of Satyaloka is given. In Satyaloka, Nayatra shoko narjarana mrityur. There is no lamentation, old age, death, etc. Of course, it is there, but it is very slow to notice, actually. And there is no suffering except compassion seeing people of the lower planetary system suffering, like that. Tato Vishesham Pratipadya Nirbhaya Stenatmanapo Nalamurtiratvaram Jyotirmayo Vayu Mupetya Kale Vayuatmana Kam Brihadatmalingam. So then after reaching the Satyaloka, he experiences the pleasure of Satyaloka for a while. After he experiences the pleasure of Satyaloka, he thinks, well, I'm satisfied. Let me move forward. So then he leaves Satyaloka, he gives up that body, he gives up that gross body and a part of his subtle body, and then moves to then there are 8 layers, right? Earth, water, fire, air, ether, and beyond that is false ego, beyond that is Mahatattva, beyond that is Pradhan. 8 layers are there. He goes to each one of these layers, does the same thing. He gets a gross body, which is perfectly suitable to enjoy in that particular layer. Once he is satisfied, gives up that gross body, a part of his subtle body, and goes to the next layer. Like that, he reaches till the stage of Pradhan. Granena gandham rasanena vairasam rupam cha drishtya swasanam tvachaiva shrotrena chopetya nabogunatvam pranena chakuti mupaiti yogi. So Granena gandham rasanena vairasam. So when he reaches each of these layers of earth, water, fire, air, and ether, in the earth layer, he gets an earthy body, which is perfectly suitable to enjoy the sense of smell. He enjoys it. He says satisfied. Goes to the next layer, water layer. He gets a watery body, which is perfectly suited to enjoy the sense of taste. Satisfied, gives it up, goes to the next, like that. Sabhuta Sukshmendriya Sannikarsham Manomayam Devamayam Vikaryam Samsadya Gatya Sahatena Yati Vijnana Tattvam Guna Sannirodham. Then he attains the When earth, water, fire, and ether, when he is completed, then he reaches the stage of false ego. So from false ego, actually, if you, it is not described later, the creation will be described, that how from the layer of false ego, the living entity, during creation, mind, intelligence, the karmendriyas, the gyanendriyas, the prana, and all the elements for the body are all collected from the layer of false ego. So he deposits, okay, now I am ready for liberation. Whatever I took from you, I don't need them anymore. So you take it back. So they deposit it back in the layer of false ego. तेनात्मनात्मानम उपैति शांतम आनंदम आनंदमयो वसाने एताम गतिम भागवतिम गतो यः सवै पुनर्नेह विसज्जतेंग. So one, he deposits everything in the layer of false ego, and he reaches the stage of Mahat Tattva Pradhan, and then he enters into Brahmajyoti. So where the last finer traces of subtle body is also given up at the stage of Pradhan, then he enters into the Brahmajyoti, and having gone there, no one comes back. Savai punarna iha vishajyate anga. So one does not come back having gone to this place. Okay. Ete sritir te nrupa veda gite tvayavi prishte cha sanatane cha yevai pura brahmana ahatushta aradito bhagavan vasudevaha. These two paths that you have asked for, you said you asked me for the best path, but I have to consider, I have to tell you the opinion of the others also. Other people think that the greatest goal is this Sayujya Mukti, to be attained by these two types of yoga. I have described this. Previously also I have spoken about this path to Brahmaji when he desired to know about these two paths, like that. But then he says, Nahyatonya Shivapan Vishatah Samsrita Viha Vasudeve Bhagavati Bhakti Yogo Yato Bhavet. Even though I have described these two paths of yoga, but there is no other path which is more auspicious for a person who is suffering in this world of samsara. There is no better path to escape this world than the path of sadhana bhakti, by which one attains prema for Vasudev. So the highest sadhana is sadhana bhakti, he says. Bhagavan Brahma Katsnena Triranviksha Manishaya Tadadyavasyat Kutasto Ratiratmanyato Bhavet. So, and this is not just my opinion. After manifesting the Vedas, one understanding is Brahmaji, another understanding is the Supreme Lord himself. Either it is Brahmaji or the Supreme Lord. They themselves 3 times reviewed the Vedas and tried to understand what is the conclusion of the Vedas. They came to the conclusion that the ultimate goal of life is to establish a loving relationship with the Supreme Lord, which is Prema, and the means of attaining it is Sadhana Bhakti. So the conclusion of the Vedas, as concluded by Brahmaji and the Supreme Lord, who reviewed the Vedas 3 times, is that the highest goal is Prema, and the highest means of attaining that is Sadhana Bhakti. Okay. So now that he has described the path of yoga, he is comparing and contrasting this path of yoga with bhakti, right? Bhagavan sarva bhuteshu lakshitah swatmana harehe drishyar bhutadibir drishta lakshaner anumapakaihi. So this is actually a technical verse. I will not touch this. I will just briefly mention sometime when we discuss this in detail. Maybe we can discuss this. So then one may say, how do I know? You say that the ultimate goal is to understand the Supreme Lord and establish a relationship with him. How do I know? How do I know or see the Lord who is the object of one's prema? He says that the Lord and the jiva are inferred by symptoms such as observable intelligence. I will not elaborate on this now, but maybe some other time I will elaborate on this verse. Tasmat sarvatmana rajan hari sarvatra sarvada shrutavya kirtitavyascha smartavyo bhagavan pranam. Therefore I told you, my dear Parikshit Maharaj, even though these other paths of attaining Sahyajya Mukti and other things are there, but the highest path is to establish a relationship with the Supreme Lord on the platform of prema through the practice of sadhana bhakti. Therefore I said, Tasmad Bharata Sarvatma Bhagavan Ishvaro Harihi Shrotavya kirtitavyascha smartavyascha ichata abhayam. I am reiterating it right now. Tasmat Sarvatmana Rajan Haris Sarvatra Sarvada Shrotavya Kirtitavyascha Smartavyo Bhagavan Pranam. At that time, I told, but I did not give a reason. But now I am giving a very conclusive reason. Therefore, the ultimate goal of life is to, with wholeheartedly, hear, chant, and remember Krishna, his name, form, glories, and pastimes. And if you do this, what happens? पिबन्ति भगवत आत्मनस्सतां कथामृतं श्रवणपुटेषु संवृतं पुनन्ति ते विषय विदूषिताशयं व्रजन्ति तच्चरण सरोरुहान्तिकम्. If you drink these nectarian pastimes of the Supreme Lord through the cup of your ears, two things happen. If you are a struggling sadhaka, then punanti te vishaya vidushita ashayam. All your materially contaminated heart will be completely purified by this Krishna Kathamrita. But if you are already a perfected devotee, then this Krishna Katha, what will happen? Vrajanti tatcharana saroruhantikam. As soon as you hear this subject matter or chant the holy name or remember the Lord, which is all compared to this Kathamritam, then immediately the person is transported to the lotus feet of Krishna. Like that. So in this way, even though he talks about these two paths of liberation through yoga, he also concludes by telling, compared to these paths, the path of bhakti is the topmost. So this brings us to the end of this chapter. Oh, I sort of surprised myself, even though I went 10 minutes extra time. I apologize for that, but I didn't expect that I would complete the overview of the second chapter also. So thank you very much. So we will pause now for some question and answers discussions. So Balram Prasad Prabhu, I will unmute the devotees and then they can speak.
Hare Krishna, Guru Shakti Prabhu, Dandavat Pranam.
Yes.
Thank you so
Dandavat.
much. Prabhu, I have some basic questions. Now that you explained, so Srimad Bhagavatam is more of prema and bhakti, right? So the basic question, what I was thinking about is, Vasudev wrote the whole thing and he was not happy, he was despondent, and Narada Muni comes and then he says, glorify the Lord, and then he wrote Bhagavatam. So my question is, the Bhagavatam is already there, but he added the more glories of Krishna, that means more of bhakti aspects in Bhagavatam, or was it not? Because it looks like the second chapter, even though he is bringing up the supremacy of bhakti, he is comparing why the people are taking so many paths, but based on the Vedas, etc. He also wrote all this, right? So this different type of revelation and so many things he wrote. And why did he really write? Because it leads to so many varieties of people following varieties of organization. If you really see now, my God, it's mind-boggling how many people are following zillion, because it's like it would have been written years ago, some, thousands of years ago, but it is a generation after generation, it practices comes and comes and comes, and then it takes time to implement, right? So somehow I was thinking, why did he really put all these very technicalities of taking these various parts instead of taking just directly bhakti?
Well, how is he going to implant the faith in the path of bhakti in your heart when multiple people are going to first Shukadev Goswami and Vyasadeva have to earn your trust, right? They have to earn your trust. Why should you believe in them when there are other sages who speak about Jnana Yoga, other sages who speak about Bhakti Yoga, Ashtanga Yoga and other such things? They have to gain your trust. Even in advertisements, you see, even for a toothpaste advertisement, they advertise what does this toothpaste have which the other toothpaste don't have. Or even in mineral water, for that example, for that matter, even they say that, oh, this is not completely stripped of all the minerals, the essential minerals are added, and things like that. So therefore, if you so this has to be done. So you have to present a comparative explanation of while the others are also coming from a bona fide Vedic literature, what distinguishes bhakti you can perfectly establish only if there is a reasonable comparison made between the other paths and bhakti. Otherwise, you know, there are sections of Bhagavatam which are meant for those who are already convinced of the supremacy of bhakti, and they are just looking for some devotional nourishment. Such sections are also there, but there may be people who are struggling to uh, mm, trust the path of bhakti. So for such people also Bhagavatam has to cater to bring them out of their practice of jnana or yoga and bring them to the path of bhakti. For such purposes, there are multiple reasons. I had once presented it in one of the Bhakti Sangha classes. I can probably share you the links. There are multiple reasons why these kind of subject matters are there in Bhagavatam. It accomplishes multiple purposes for by doing that. But even in describing these things briefly, uh, a sincere student will not get distracted to follow these paths. He will become very much convinced that the path of bhakti is the only path which is fit to be practiced. So that it does not, even the presence of these things in Bhagavatam does not distract a sincere student of Srimad Bhagavatam from practicing bhakti actually.
Prabhu, you are absolutely right. But if you look at the other paths, Srimad Bhagavatam is more, even other than ISKCON, Gaudiya. I don't know how many people are following Srimad Bhagavatam. If you look at the Sri Sampradaya, they are more into Vishnu Puran, right? And it's there, Bhagavatam is a little there, but more importance in Vishnu Puran. So, but that means people who are very fortunate only comes to Srimad Bhagavatam even to make a comparison, right? At least we are somehow we are fortunate because we directly came to ISKCON. I don't know anything about anything. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Anyway,
Yeah, but still, that is the nature of bhakti. If you are only a very fortunate person receives the seed of devotion, and even that person, if he is really fortunate, then he comes to a stage where he gets the pristine, clear presentation of devotional service as given in Bhagavatam, which is absolutely not seen in any other Puranas. If someone is really fortunate, then he gets that opportunity. So we all are, in one sense, privileged actually. Privileged lot, really fortunate lot, not exactly privileged, but really fortunate actually.
That's only because of Lord Mahaprabhu, right? Lord Chaitanya.
Yeah.
Otherwise, I don't think we would have been even listening Bhagavatam at this hour. No way.
Yeah. True.
Thank you, Prabhu. True. Thank you very much.
Prahladanand, Prabhu.
Thank you very much, Prabhuji, for allowing me to speak. Pranam to you and everyone. My question is revolving around this 10th Canto, 2nd chapter, Slok Brahmaji spoke. Ye anya arvindaks vimukta maninas tvesta bhavat avisuddha buddhaya aruhya krasren param padam tata patanti yada anadrut yusmadangraya. So my question is there any Paramatmavadi who now switches on to bhakti and then reaches Vaikuntha Lok like that? Because here it says Anadrut Yusmadangra, means they are kind of ignoring Bhagavan Krishna's bhakti. This is what my understanding is.
Well, okay, that verse is much more deeper than that. So Anadrita Yushmadangraya means those people who neglect the bhakti part of that yoga. So even Ashtanga yoga has elements of bhakti. So, but if he gives up that element of bhakti, which he should not, then he will not even attain that goal of Sayujya Mukti. So he will fall down from being a Jivan Mukta only. After reaching the stage of Jivan Mukta, he will fall down again to the material world pool. So, can Ashtanga yogis reach Vaikuntha? No. Okay. They can reach only Brahma Jyoti.
Nice.
But if they practice a path of yoga in which bhakti is predominant, there is something called Yoga Mishra Bhakti. It is predominantly bhakti with some tinges of yoga. Then they can go to Vaikuntha and attain Salokya Mukti or Sarupya Mukti like that. That is possible. Still, they will not attain Prema, because Prema can be attained only by Shuddha Bhakti. But if they practice some kind of mixed Bhakti with predominance of Bhakti, but very little tinges of Karma Jnana Yoga, then they can still go to Vaikuntha. That is possible.
Is there any example like that in our literature where, some bhakti mixed yogi reached the Vaikuntha planet like that?
The 4 Kumaras fall within that category.
4 Kumaras? Okay.
Yeah.
So they were Paramatmavadi to start with.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Thank you very much for explaining this. Your classes are so mathematical, so like PhD levels.
I just wish it was devotional one day, Prabhu.
But it is so. One has to revise this class 1 or 2 times in order to, systematize the thought pattern like that. So that I thank you very much for all your, input, and then with Pranam.
Hare Krishna. Suresh Shyam, Prabhu.
Yeah, Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Dandavad Pranam. Thank you very much.
Dandavad, Prabhu.
Very enlivening class. So, Prabhu, few quick questions, Prabhu. The Bhagavad Gita, chapter 8. Is it saying Krama Mukti Bhakti? Sorry, Krama Mukti path?
Yeah.
Okay.
One part of it talks about it, Krama Mukti.
Okay. So,
Yeah.
Prabhu, this one, the Lord's form is compared to each canto, right? So that comparison also, is it imaginary, Prabhu?
No, it is real. It is not imaginary. Because the form of Bhagavatam is the literary form of the Supreme Lord only. So it is not just an imagination. It is real. The form of the Bhagavatam actually has the first 2 cantos as the feet of the Lord, and the other cantos as the various other limbs of the Lord. So it's a real form, and it's not an imagination actually.
Okay. So, Prabhu, one more question. In that 4th verse, 5th verse, 6th verse onwards, how to live, right? Use your arms, right? Those are not like, use tree barks, right? Use torn clothes from the street. Not feeling, it's not very practical, right, Prabhu? It's not appealing to save time also and spend.
It's not appealing to you, because that was recommended for a Ashtanga yogi, not for Bhakti yogis.
Okay.
The principle for Bhakti yogi that they can take from that verse is, keep your life simple. Don't over endeavor for things which will take you away from your primary practice of devotional service. That's the essence. But that is suggested for Ashtanga yogis and not for Bhakti yogis.
Thank you, Prabhu. So one request, Prabhu, I think based on Parikshit Maharaj's question, it is ending in 3rd chapter, right, Prabhu? So if you have time, and that, please complete us till 3rd chapter, Prabhu. Right? The question of
I will see, Prabhu. I will let you know, because from January 1st onwards, I'm actually starting. Maybe we do have one more Tuesday time.
Monday, Prabhu. Yours Tuesday, yes.
Yeah, Monday for you, Tuesday for me. Yeah. Okay, Prabhu. I'll consider.
Organizers and because I think this question is ending in 3rd chapter, right, Prabhu?
Yeah. True.
Thank you, Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Dandavad.
Hare Krishna. Mother Gail.
Hare Krishna, Prabhu. Oh my God, several things. But the first question I'll ask is actually a follow-up on your answer to a question, I think Prahladananda Prabhu, or just now, I don't know. But anyway, apparently, if a person attains to one of the Vaikuntha planets, right, even though it's a spiritual world, that doesn't mean that such a person has necessarily attained prema. Is that true?
Yeah, true. It is true.
So then, therefore, I'm thinking that my conception of prema needs to be adjusted, because in order to attain to the spiritual world, especially the Vaikuntha planets, that your love for Krishna does not have to be completely pure, or is it that it just has to be completely free of any desire for any kind of material enjoyment, but it doesn't have, but you're
I mean, they don't have material and desires for material enjoyment,
right,
but
but that doesn't mean
nevertheless,
it's prema.
yeah, that doesn't mean they have prema. See,
Okay.
when Prabhupada says you cannot go to the spiritual world unless your last trace of material desire is gone or selfish desire is gone. Prabhupada says that, right?
Mm.
So when Prabhupada says you, who is Prabhupada addressing?
Any jiva.
Is he addressing any jiva? I don't think so. Prabhupada is addressing those who have developed trust in Srila Prabhupada's words and his conclusions. His students he is addressing, which means basically Prabhupada is addressing those who have embraced the path of pure devotional service. So for those who have embraced the path of pure devotional service, they cannot go to the spiritual world without essentially removing the last trace of selfish desire from their heart. Like say, for example, how do you get into an Ivy League school? So if you want to get into a Ivy League school, like say Harvard or Princeton, so you will have to really do well in your studies and do all that. So, so if I have to get into the, so does it mean if my friend is studying in one of the Ivy League schools and I wish to go and meet him, do I have to be a super genius, brilliant person with, or if I want to, let's say, establish a ice cream parlor in Princeton campus, do I have to have do I have to be a brilliant person? So it is not needed, right? So when someone says, if you want to get into an Ivy League campus, you should be brilliant, you should be very hardworking. I mean, it is understood that the person who is, the person whom you're addressing is wishing to get into the Ivy League school as a student. But not everyone who gets into the Ivy League campus is a student essentially, right? So there are people who may have ice cream parlors. There may be people who may be janitors who are cleaning the campus. They don't have to have straight A's in all their school and pass exams. So they are still sharing the same Ivy League campus, Princeton or Harvard. So similarly, so when Prabhupada says your last trace of selfishness has to be completely destroyed before you go to Vaikuntha, essentially Prabhupada is addressing devotees, pure devotees, or practitioners of pure devotional service. This is not something that he is addressing the practitioners of mixed devotional service, because mixed devotional service is, Prabhupada is not even considering it as a possible sadhana that he is prescribing to any of his followers. So therefore, for such persons, for mixed devotees, they can get into the campus of Vaikuntha, but they cannot be an Ivy League student or a student of prema. They can do these other works, salokya, sarshti, samipya, those kind of things they can have, but not prema.
Okay, so you said that Srila Prabhupada was addressing devotees.
Yeah, that statement is
Yeah.
meant for devotees.
Yeah.
Because it is quite clear in Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, in Nectar of Devotion only, it is mentioned that there are three kinds of people who go to Vaikuntha. There are three levels of liberation that is mentioned. All three of them. Only one of them attain prema. The other two do not attain prema. It is very clearly there. And Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur also, in many of his Bhagavatam commentaries, he very clearly mentions this. So not everyone who is in Vaikuntha is at the stage of prema. It is not true.
So what are those three levels of, is it three levels of liberation?
So it is called as Sukha Ishwaryottara Mukti, Prema Sevottara Mukti, and Prema. So there are three categories. I will share some links where I have elaborated on that, because here it will
It's
become
too
a
much.
very detailed elaboration on that. But in essence, it is possible actually. Not for you, not for you and me. For us, we have to completely reach prema and nothing less than that. Unless we choose to give up the path of bhakti and start practicing some mixed devotional service. If we choose to stick to the practice of pure devotional practice, pure devotional sadhana, we cannot go to Vaikuntha or Goloka Vrindavan until our last trace of selfishness is gone.
Okay, so the difference is that a person who has attained prema has no trace of selfish desire, but a person who, let's say, has not attained prema but has attained the Vaikuntha planets, they do have selfishness or selfish desire, but that selfish desire is does not
Acceptable.
include, is not
It's acceptable in Vaikuntha.
no. I'm saying that selfish desire does not include any material selfish desire.
Yeah, it does not include any material selfish desire.
Yeah, so I think that was the blurry part, that because normally when we talk about selfish desire, we talk about enjoying materially, but
you have selfish desires. You have selfish desires with the improper understanding of the self, and you can have selfish desires with fairly proper understanding of the self also. Like when you selfish desire on the platform of false ego is what will make you remain in the material world.
Yes.
But selfish desires on the level of fairly evolved true ego can take you up to Vaikuntha or Brahmajyoti or Vaikuntha. Okay. So even those who go to Brahmajyoti, they don't want to suffer in this material world, because they have understood that this material world is not my constitutional position. Okay. So they want to go there and enjoy. Similarly, these people who go to Vaikuntha, they also are very clear. I am not this body. I am the spirit soul. I have nothing to do with this material world. And I wish to worship the Supreme Lord. They are of that also. So they primarily worship the Supreme Lord only. But at the same time, they have tinges of desire to enjoy the spiritual opulence which is available in Vaikuntha.
Very nice. Very nice, Prabhu.
So that is there.
Okay, it's very clear. Very clear. Thank you so much. And then also, what I'm not understanding is, how is it that a person, a yogi, who he's meditating on the Paramatma, which has form, yet his destination is the impersonal Brahmajyoti?
That's his aspiration. That is his aspiration.
But once you have seen the form of the Lord, it's like a step down, isn't it? To go from something basically more beautiful to something less beautiful.
Well, he sees for him the form of the Lord is the means. So he does not distrust the means, but he does not have sufficient sukriti to consider establishing a relationship with that form of the Lord as the end. That needs some devotional sukriti. So he has sufficient sukriti to consider the form of the Lord as a means to attain his end. But he does not have sufficient sukriti to consider the end to be establishing a relationship with that beautiful form of the Lord. So therefore, this is like very much possible that some people, they go to get their undergraduate degree, even though they have already decided that I want to continue my father's business. So they have already decided that I wish to continue my father's business. So I just need a degree just so that, I'm socially acceptable. So for social acceptance, they may go and study and get a degree. But ultimately, they have already decided that I'm going to pursue my father's business. So these people are like that, For them, meditation on the form of the Lord, not that they consider the form of the Lord to be imaginary or unreal, but it is real and capable of fulfilling my desire for liberation. That much they accept.
Okay, Prabhu. Thank you. And then, I was dealing with some distractions here, so I didn't catch how it is that meditating on the Virat Rupa would lead to detachment, of a yogi who has material desires.
Well, I can very simplistically present, but there must be much more details to it, which is not revealed in Srimad Bhagavatam. So the simplistic explanation is that whatever he wants to enjoy or wherever he wants to enjoy, when he meditates on this Virat form, he sees that none of it belongs to me. For me to enjoy something, it has to belong to me. But whatever I wish to enjoy is belonging to some other person. So if he is a reasonable person, then he would not want to enjoy someone else's property. And also, when he sees that literally every single thing that one might want to enjoy belongs to this personality, then it may sort of trigger off some level of detachment and some level of desire to worship that personality. So that is what is expected to happen through meditation on this Virat form.
Oh boy, well, in my case, it only leads to guilt, not detachment.
Well, I mean, see, you are projecting yourself in the position of a yogi. So therefore, if it was the yogi, if he felt guilt instead of purification, then what would happen? Then he would continue meditating on that universal form, then undergo this gradual liberation, and he would get to enjoy each of these things and eventually achieve liberation. But some others who will not feel that guilt, but eventually get purified, they will become qualified to meditate on the Paramatma form of the Lord.
Yeah, I don't know if I quite caught that, but it seems to be connected to this other question I had about, the Krama path versus meditation on
Paramatma.
Yeah, it's like I wasn't clear. Which yogi meditates, takes to the Krama path where you meditate on each one of the elements, and then gradually.
Not each one, you don't meditate on each one of the elements.
Well,
you go to that particular planet and you get an appropriate gross body, which will facilitate your enjoyment of the pleasures which are available in that particular planetary system. Then you enjoy it, then you give up that gross body, give up a part of that subtle body in which such desires are stored, and then you move on to the next planet, like that.
So which yogi goes that way and which yogi, maybe the yogi, so the yogi who is attached, they would take to that Krama path, and the yogi who is detached, he meditates directly on Paramatma.
Yeah.
And I think I think you chose not to go into this, but I just want to make sure that you didn't explain it actually, that how is it that meditating on Krishna as both the efficient and material causes, how can that lead to detachment?
Oh well, oh that is uh, that is different. That is different. But that has nothing to do with the explanation of a, the description of a object of meditation for a attached yogi. The purpose of that whole description and the context of that whole description is different. It has
Oh,
nothing to do with what we are discussing right now.
okay. Okay, Prabhu. Thank you very, very much. Hare
Hare
Krishna.
Krishna. Sukha Mataji.
Hare Krishna, Prabhuji, Dandavat Pranams. Wonderful class, Prabhuji. My question was also along the lines of what Gail Mataji just asked. And I'm still not a little clear on how the yogi, you said he meditates on the lotus feet of the Lord, is his, he's fixed on the lotus feet of the Lord, and still, as for Brahma Jyoti, that kind of beats me. So.
Well, I mean, in one sense, see, he, like, for example, let's say there is a particular shopkeeper in whom you have developed a very good trust, that he gives very good unadulterated products. So every time you go and whenever you want to purchase groceries, you go to that shop, you get really good quality foodstuffs. So that level of trust you have developed, but that does not mean that everyone who has developed that level of trust would want to marry that person, would fall in love with that person. That is not necessary. Some people may. So that one of the the customers of that, I'm sorry for using such a gross example, but some of one of the customers may actually have so much trust in that person, and may start liking the personal qualities of that person also, and may want to establish a relationship with that person by marrying him. That is also possible. We see it in this material world. So every person who trusts that shopkeeper as on a business platform does not necessarily have to develop a desire to establish a personal relationship with that person. So similarly, these yogis, they have sufficient trust in the Supreme Lord's ability to give them liberation. They are not Narayana Parayana, they are Moksha Parayana. So their goal is moksha. Their goal is moksha. The Supreme Lord is a means to attain it. Okay. So they see the Lord as a means. So to see the Lord as the end is not an intellectual exercise. It is something which involves the heart, where sufficient Agyata Sukriti through the association of pure devotees, only that can create the favorable impressions in a heart where the person wants to establish a relationship with the Lord, and that is what he values. These yogis, they do have firm trust in the Supreme Lord's form as a means to attain their goal of moksha, but they don't have sufficient Agyata Sukriti and the association of favorable devotees to transform their heart where they wish to establish a relationship with that personality. That they do not have. Does it make sense, Mother?
It's like, too close yet too far kind of a thing, Prabhuji.
It's one thing what I'll tell you, Mataji. This seems very difficult for you because you are a devotee. Because you are a devotee, you are finding it very difficult to understand. but not everyone is a devotee. So you are seeing it. So therefore, what makes sense to us depends on our own experience, what we have experienced. So therefore, what makes logical sense to you or what does not makes logical sense to you, a person with a different experience and a different qualification, it may make perfect sense to him or her. So therefore, you are finding it very difficult to relate to because you are looking at a yogi through the mind of a devotee. So you are superimposing your mind on the mind of a devotee. Just like Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna was given the celestial eyes to see the form, but he did not, but Krishna did not give him a celestial heart to process what he was seeing. So he was seeing the Virat form through the celestial eyes, but Krishna did not replace his devotee heart. So with a devotee heart, he was seeing the celestial vision of the Virat form. He felt disgusted and fearful. So similarly, you are hearing about a yogi aspiring for Brahmajyoti despite meditating on the form of the Lord. You are hearing this or seeing this with a devotee heart. But the yogi does not have a devotee heart. As Brahmaji says, Tvam Bhakti Yoga Paribhavita Hrit Saroja Ase Shrutekshita Pato Nanunata Pumsam. He says, Krishna appears as Bhagavan in the heart of a person which has been completely processed by the practice of devotional service. But so therefore, I am not surprised that it does not make sense to you because you are not a yogi, you are a devotee. It does not make sense to me either. But I can understand that people have different adhikaras, different qualifications. So for those who lack that sukriti, devotional impressions sufficiently, for them it is difficult actually.
Prabhuji, I have also heard, in a few classes which I long time back attended, of I don't know if you've heard of Muralidhara Swamiji, and they have this Namadwar, and they also look at bhakti as a means to moksha. And I don't know if you've heard of Vishakha Hari, Hariji, he's called very popularly.
Yeah, but
in
I mean, I
Chennai.
don't know what I done,
Mhm.
but sort of I am, but they speak all kinds of things. I mean, a lot of it sometimes sounds like pure devotional, but
Mhm.
lot of it is mixed devotional. It's not really, I could not, mm, and sometimes they do speak about, I mean, I don't know. I have about some other demigod worship also they have spoken. I don't know really, but from whatever little I have heard sporadically, it is lot of it is not even pure devotional service, even though it sounds like that.
Sure, yeah, they do worship Chaitanya Mahaprabhu and they follow him.
Yeah, but that is not. They do worship Ramakrishna Paramahamsa also.
Yeah. Thanks so much, Prabhuji, for your wonderful classes. I hope to get your association again, Prabhu. Thank you so
Hare
much. Hare Krishna.
Okay, it's 8:40 here. Maybe one last question, Mother Gail, and then we'll have to end.
Yeah, I'm sorry, Prabhu. Just now, you referred to the universal form that Arjuna was seeing, with Krishna having so many millions of forms, right? And the the soldiers going through his teeth,
Yeah,
helplessly.
yeah.
And you
Yeah.
refer to that form as Virat Rupa.
For me, it's the same. Virat Rupa or the or the universal form. It's the same thing.
Yeah. So my question is, that universal form, or Virat Rupa, whatever you want to call it, is that an imaginary form?
Yeah, it is.
Oh.
It was an imaginary form only. Yes.
So,
I mean,
but
it's not that you cannot see something which is imaginary.
no,
Like, for
no,
example,
I know that, but I thought that there's a universal form that of Krishna that is actually real spiritual, is just temporarily manifested. My
well, how
understanding
can
is that
something,
there's
how
two
can,
types of universal forms. One which is
yeah,
imaginary, right?
Mhm.
Where, you know, as you were saying, it utilizes real things in order to create that concept, right? But
yeah.
another one is not imaginary, is actual, is spiritual in nature. It's just that is only temporarily manifest.
Well, I mean, I've heard this, but it never really sort of made sense to me. I mean, how can the form of the Lord, which is made of matter, be spiritual or transcendental? No. I've heard this argument, but I have not read it anywhere. It
Oh, well,
is,
I'm glad that you've at least heard it. So I know it's not just something that I've misunderstood.
no, I've heard it many times, but I was
Oh,
never convinced. And I could not get a very convincing explanation from them also. So, yeah, it is. It is just an imaginary form. There is no real form of the Lord which is made of matter. Actually, it cannot be.
oh,
Yeah,
okay. That I'm happy to hear that. So I'm happy to hear that, you know, I wasn't crazy, and that, you know, because this makes sense to me. Thank you.
correct. Thank you. Okay, I think we'll pause here. It's time. Thank
Thank
you.
you so much, Prabhuji, for coming and for spending so much time with all of us and answering all these questions. Very, very enlightening class, Prabhuji. I'll contact you later about next week. We'll see.
We'll see.
Thank you so much, Prabhuji. Vancha kalpatarubhyascha
Kalpatarubhyascha
kripasinubhya
kripasindubhyev cha
patitanam
patitanam pavanebhyo vaishnavebhyo
Vaishnavebhyo namo namaha. Ananta Koti Vaishnav Vrind ki jai. Grantraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai. Srila Prabhupada ki jai.
Ad ki jai.
His Grace Balaram Shakti Prabhuji ki jai.
Jai.
All devotees ki
Thank you,
jai.
Prabhuji.
So much, Prabhuji. Hare Krishna.